All right, cool.
Mhm.
Um, and can you all just see my screen or uh just the people in the Zoom?
Just just the humans.
Oh, okay. I have the bios to the right, so just wanted to make sure that wasn't in view. But yeah, thanks so much for joining. For those who don't know me, my name is Sherelle Barbie. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the print and culture editor at In These Times magazine. So yeah, so we're working on a really exciting culture issue that's kind of covering a lot of different topics, but more generally, just how does race, class, gender, sexuality, disability status, and nationality trickle into our everyday experiences? How does it influence the art, music, and norms that permeate our world? And then more specifically for this panel, what is the role of art in times of crises, in times of genocide, and in times of societal upheaval? So yeah, I tried to be intentional with the poets that I invited to join this panel. Um, so yeah, we have a lot of exciting folks joining us. I'll just do a quick round of introductions. Um, so yeah, we have Jake Skeets, who is the author of Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers, which was the winner of the National Poetry Series, American Book Award, Kate Tufts Discovery Award, and Whitting Award. His work appeared widely in journals and magazines such as Poetry, the New York Times, and the Paris Review. Other honors include the NEA Grant for Arts Project, a Mellon Projecting All Voices Fellowship, and the 2023-24 Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi. He is from the Navajo Nation and teaches at the University of Oklahoma. Thanks for joining us, Jake. Mosab Abu Toha is a Palestinian poet, short story writer, and essayist from Gaza. His first poetry collection, Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, was a finalist for the National Books Critics Circle Award and for poetry. And he won the Palestine Book Award and the American Book Award, as well as the Walcott Poetry Prize for that. Abu Toha is the founder of the Edward Said Library in Gaza, which he hopes to rebuild. Um, and he recently won an Overseas Press Club Award for his Letter from Gaza columns for the New Yorker. And then we have José Olivarez, who is the son of Mexican immigrants and the author of two collections of poems, including most recently Promises of Gold, which was longlisted for the 2023 National Book Awards. His debut book of poems, Citizen Illegal, was the finalist for the Penn Jen Stein Book Award and was the winner of the 2018 Chicago Review of Books Poetry Prize. Um, Along with Felicia Rose Chavez and Willie Perdomo, he co-edited the poetry anthology Breakbeat Poets, Volume 4, Latinx, as well as co-publishing the hybrid book Por Siempre in 2023 with Antonio Salazar. Thanks for joining us. And then we have Safia Elhillo. Sorry, did I pronounce that right? Sorry.
Elhillo.
Elhillo, thank you. Sudanese by way of DC, she is the author of Girls That Never Die, The January Children, Home is Not a Country, and Bright Red Fruit, and co-editor of the anthology Halal If You Hear Me. She is the winner of the Sillimer First Book Prize for African Poets, the California Book Award, and the Arab American Book Award, as well as the Brunel International African Poetry Prize. And she's also a recipient of the Cave Canem Fellowship, as well as the Wallace Stegner Fellowship from the Stanford University, and a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us. Oh, these bios are so beautiful and long. And then I think that's everyone. Okay, so last but not least, we have Porsha Olayiwola, who is an individual World Poetry Slam champion and the author of the collection I Shimmer Sometimes Too. She is the current poet laureate for the city of Boston, a 2020 Academy of American Poets Poet Laureate Fellow, and is the assistant professor of poetry at Emerson College. Thanks so much, Porsha, for moderating. And I'll turn it over to you to take it from here.
Word. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm super excited, honored, privileged to be here and to be like chatting with y'all whose work I often pore over. And many of you I've met already, and some of you I'm meeting digitally. So hi. Yeah, so I'll just jump right in it to be conscious of time and like make sure we give each other some time back, especially during the context of the world that we're living in. I think there's so much going on, and I personally am filled with feelings. So I'm just gonna jump right in. I think you got these questions beforehand, and I may jump around. I think I'm going to start with a favorite book. And this can be a book that you are currently reading, or one that you find you keep returning to, and especially in times of turmoil. And maybe if you can say why. And feel free to just jump in, unmute yourselves. But not all at once, if you don't mind.
I can start, I think. Hi, everybody. It's truly an honor to be in the same sort of Zoom room with you all. I look up to each one of you. I don't really have a favorite book, but I think when I receive this question, I always sort of just look at the books that I'm reading right now, or the books that I'm returning to consistently over the past sort of like moments around when the question is being asked. And so right now, the two books that I've been sort of rereading over and over again has been Concentrate by Courtney Faye Taylor and Black Pastoral by Ariana Benson. So I'm very much a poet of place. So having poets sort of like interrogate a specific region, a specific landscape, I'm very much interested in. And it helps me sort of like, come to terms with the world around us, I think. The sort of seeing poets sort of like look around where they are living or existing and sort of like interrogating that.
Thank you for that. Other folks? This is my own reading list that I'm establishing.
I am on my 27th reread of Arya Aber's first collection of poems, which is called Hard Damage. And I feel like I find something new in it each time. Arya is Afghan, raised in Germany, and the poems are written in English. And so there's like a real stretchiness to the English that is very exciting to me. And then, it is a wide spanning collection of poems, but one of the things at its heart is an interrogation of the US invasion of Afghanistan. And so what I appreciate, particularly in this current reread of the book, is just the deep rage in the poems, and the ways in which the language of the poems, the forms of the poems is in conversation with that rage, where sometimes it's all spelled out there at once, and then sometimes it's a poem that kind of tricks you outwardly with its lyric and apparent beauty, and then you see the rage kind of trickling out in the pauses in the language. And I don't know, misery loves company, so I'm having a nice time reading whatever angry poems I can get my hands on.
Thank you so much, Porsha. Thank you, Cheryl, for this invitation. It's my great pleasure to be in conversation with you and the other poets. I come from Gaza, as you know, so most of my favorite books would be in the Arabic language, but which are translated into English. But I also have other favorite books in the English language. But here, because of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in many Arab countries, Sudan including, I'm thinking about Mahmoud Darwish's prose book, for a memory for forgetfulness. And I'm thinking about us these days writing about memories, but not distant memories, but I mean recent memories of the war that's happening now in Gaza. I mean, we are writing about these things while they are still happening. And even when we are writing about them in the future, we are writing about them in the hope that these will not be literally forgotten, but they will be something like a lesson, for the humanity in the future, that this should be not happening again. So let's just delete it from our mindset. Let's just learn from the atrocities that have been committed against the native people in America, in Palestine, in Sudan, in Africa, everywhere. So this book, which talks about the siege in Lebanon in 1982, when Mahmoud Darwish talks about the symbolism of death, of coffee, of doves, of minute details that he was living through, the struggle that he went through trying to make a cup of coffee when there was a tank opposite his window. So I'm thinking about this book a lot because it could be happening. It could be written right now in many places. So I relate to this book a lot. Mahmoud Darwish is famous for his poetry, but maybe not many people know that he is also a very great prose writer. And this book, Memory for Forgetfulness, can be read as a prose poem book or a memoir. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here with all of you. Cheryl, thank you for the invitation. I just have a poem to share, and that's the poem that I return to the most. And it is I Must Become a Menace to My Enemies by June Jordan. Like Safia, I think I'm attracted to the rage in the poem. I think in these moments, there's, especially in the United States, where I grew up and where I write from, there's like this weird insistence on like propriety and like maintaining the norms, even when it's clear that the norms are resulting in massive violence. It's like maintaining bureaucracy. And so I think that because of that, there's in the United States a weird aversion to anger and rage. It's like the one emotion that we are most discouraged from showing and kind of showing up in our writing. At least that's my feeling. And so I'm attracted to the rage in the poem, and specifically the way that the rage is kind of grounded in love, in the understanding that, we can and should be kind of doing more for each other, that we deserve more from each other. And so that's the poem that I've returned to.
Wow. Thank you all for that. Some of these things I have, some of these things I'm going to get. I was also asking myself this, like, what are the pieces that I return to? And immediately I thought of a poem, right? Power by Audre Lorde, because of the rage. So thank y'all for just saying that. And mentioning rage as a necessary tool, if you will. I also thought about Parable of the Sower, simply because we are existing in the time in which the book takes place, which is terrifying. But thinking about influence and also maybe transitioning to y'all's own writing, this question is something that I think I heard once on a panel, and I think I was like just really impressed with, I want to say it's Kaisi Lamon, author of Heavy. We were in a discussion, and I think the question was, why do you write? Which is like such a simple question. But I think he, and I don't want to misquote him, but he stated reparations was the reason he writes, right? Of like just reclaiming things and, bringing it back to himself or to his people or et cetera. And so this has been a question for me, at least, that has kind of grounded me. Like, why am I writing? Sometimes it's for memory or to like have a permanent space for my people. But curious as to y'all's reasons. And I think, this is a question in which the answer can change or shift. So don't necessarily feel tied down, but why are you writing right now? Yeah, and feel free to like take a minute or feel free to jump in. And also want to give y'all space to like respond to each other as well. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the only reason why we are writing is that because we have nothing else to do. We are living. I mean, it's not a luxury, to write, as Audre Lorde, once said. I mean, we can't go to war zones and protect the people who are being slaughtered every day there. But at least we can write about them. I mean, in the hope, we are not only reporting about what's happening, but we are showing things that people may value in other people's lives. We don't want people to perceive other people as numbers. 100 people got killed yesterday. 500 houses were bombed last month, let's say. But I mean, my role as a poet, as a writer, is to show that it was not a house which was bombed. It was not one person who was killed. It was more than that. There are so many things about this room that you don't know as a reader, or you don't know as someone who lives a continent away from the place where it's happening. So I feel like I have to tell people that what's been destroyed, what's been taken away, is more than the word that describes them. That's why I feel like I have to do this. I have nothing else to do. I can't go and snatch an F-16 from the sky and return it to the military base. I can stop that moment after the bombing happened and show the people what really happened, not only the sound or the color of the explosion, but what was happening before, what happened during the bombing, what people were doing. So I want to show the humanity of the people, not through words, but through images, still images or moving images. That's why I think this is the only thing I can do. I can't go there. I mean, I hardly escaped Gaza with my wife and kids. I mean, even if I had the willingness to go back to Gaza, I can't, because there is no border crossing right now open between Gaza and the outside world. But at least I can continue to write. That's my only way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Other folks?
I'm thinking in particular these days about how one of the functions of poetry, to me at least, is to defamiliarize, through the act of looking, through choices being made in the language, whatever. But if day in, day out, we're looking at things like this and having them gradually become normalized, even as we are living through like deep aberrations in nature, because some of the work of a poem is looking at something like in slant or upside down or backwards or through a crack in the wall, whatever. I find, even just selfishly for myself, the work of making poetry is important and helpful in reminding myself that none of this is normal, and taking on the work of writing a poem is an invitation for me to sit in the space of looking at something like it is strange, like it is out of the ordinary, and then hopefully the record of the strangeness is preserved in the poem. But both as a reader and as a writer of poetry, I an anecdote I tell a lot is, in the first couple weeks of the war in Sudan, I felt so useless. I live in Los Angeles, California, literally on the opposite side of the planet. And I could not, for the life of me, come up with a task that felt proportionate to the scale of the need. And as almost like a sort of penance, I made it so that anytime I encountered a video, an image, anything, I had to watch it. That like act of witnessing was my contribution, was my penance, was whatever. And then the strange like cognitive thing that started to happen is, after a while, nothing bothered me like on a physical level. I think at first, I would be like sick to my stomach at the sight of blood and destruction, and it would be jarring, it would be startling, it would be strange. And then like 2-3 weeks later, one can get used to anything, you know what I mean? Which I think is kind of to our great detriment in moments where like deep empathy is called for. And that, I think, is what returned me to the page, because it feels like a great corruption is being done to my spirit, to my psyche, to my body, that I am able to look on atrocities like this, and my brain is like, yep, normal, business as usual, the natural order of things. And so, you know, one of the only ways I know to keep things weird, to keep things strange, is poetry. And so, you know, now more than ever, I think the work of defamiliarizing is important work among other important work that is being called for as well.
Yeah, jump in, Jose.
For me, I think a lot about power, and specifically, we live in a moment where, you know, news agencies that purport to be objective go to as their first source official authorities. You know what I mean? Oftentimes, the people committing the violence are the ones expected to self-report on the violences that they are committing. And so we get all sorts of ridiculous constructions of language, whether it's the passive voice that hides who is doing the violence to whom. But also what we get is, you know, accounts of situations that are in fact not at all true. And so for me, I think about writing as an opportunity to interrogate some of those sources, to kind of slow down and maybe to kind of remember that, one, everything that claims to be objective is not objective, and then two, that we must continue to I don't know. I guess I'm thinking about what Safia said about defamiliarizing ourselves and making things strange, and I just keep thinking about all the ways that we receive news and what their intention is. And I do believe that there's an intention, and I think part of the intention is that there's those who consume news and those who are the news. And so for me, maybe what I'm thinking about is the idea that to be a writer is to kind of disrupt those kinds of easy roles that we can fall into.
Yeah, and I think for me, sort of hearing everyone talk definitely sort of like brought up a lot of resonances, I feel like. And I think that's what writing does too, right? It sort of like builds coalitions, right, across regions, across communities. Because as we're thinking about language and the capacity of language, we're able to then understand the capacity of our communities, right? When we sort of begin to have conversations in and around the violences, in and around the kinds of movements we have toward a kind of liberation. And for me, I feel like this is a question that's been asked of native communities across the country, really, around, you know, what do there's an entire essay, actually, a scholarly essay called "What Do American Indians Want from Writing?" Right, and I feel like, I mean, it's a silly sort of title. I mean, it's by a native scholar who was writing around the sort of like perspective of rhetoric. But I think the idea of writing within, at least presented within the essay, talks about this idea of a rhetorical type of sovereignty. And I feel like Indigenous communities here in the United States have always been responding to or writing toward a kind of sovereignty, whether that's a physical, legal, and also rhetorical, right? What does it mean to think within the grammars, within the beauty of those grammars of your own individual communities, as opposed to conventions or constructions of settler states, right? And I think for me, what that sort of like opens up is this idea of a temporal sovereignty, right? Where we're able to sort of like almost not necessarily free our communities, but we're able to sort of situate or position our communities within a kind of temporality that's existing outside of a kind of like settler stream of consciousness or a settler stream of time, right? Where everything is so linear, everything is so black and white. And I think what poetry does, or what poetry has the capacity to do, is sort of like open up those spaces. Because, you know, language becomes impossible at some points, right? And language becomes not enough. And I feel like the job of the poet or the artist is to sort of like reach in and find those pockets of opportunity to help us see the world in different places. So in short, I think I write because I'm trying to reorient the world, or reorient the people around me, or reorient myself to look at, and, you know, the day in a new light, in new ways. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank y'all for this. I appreciate this. I feel like I'm being exceptionally selfish because I'm getting all of these juicy answers, but things I heard in response to why do I write, to defamiliarize, because of sovereignty, because of reorientation, because of to interrogate and to disrupt, to build coalition, and because it is the only thing I have to do, right? I'm just holding on to that as I prepare my own syllabus, if you will. I'm also thinking a little bit about craft. And, you know, sure, certainly poetic form, certainly, right? And more specifically, I think, right, this political climate in which Trump was president saw this boom in erasure poetry, blackout poems. But I'm curious as to how your own identity or the political climate of the world informs your craft and informs, I don't know, how you move on the page and what things you are deliberately trying to do in the context of craft that you think is very much so informed by your lived experience within the social political climate of this world. And let me know if that makes sense or if anybody needs a clarifying, right? Yeah. So does anybody want to jump in on that one?
Well, I haven't written that much poetry in the past year and a half or so since war broke out in Sudan, which I'm kind of using to mark a before and an after times. But I do find myself kind of notably moving away from figurative language. One of like the earliest tools as a poet for me was the metaphor and the simile, and I spent a lot of time in the company of those tools, and I feel that I have, at least for now, kind of abruptly lost interest. And it makes me think of Claire Schwartz has an essay reviewing Solmaz Sharif's customs, where they talk about the role of the simile and how like is not is. And so it kind of, and it opens up into this larger conversation that, Solmaz writes beautifully about kind of the failures of the project of empathy when it comes to literature. And so I think I am, in trying to do the kind of futile work of calling for help, calling for attention from my people for a war that is often referred to in mainstream media as the forgotten war, which, love that, feels amazing. But my initial impulse is simile, is metaphors, to be like, you should care about this because it is like this other thing that you care about. And that is really heartbreaking, thankless labor. And I think it is not interesting to me on like a personal, political, or craft level anymore to talk about what it's like instead of just talking about what it is, because it is not my job to get a reader who doesn't already care, to be honest. It is not my job or my people's job to humanize ourselves to someone who does not already hold our humanity as a core belief or whatever. And so it really has me interrogating what the purpose of simile and metaphor are in my work in this moment. And in this moment, when I do find myself itching to reach for simile, for metaphor, it is for the sake of appeal. I'm trying to appeal to an existing set of interests, an existing set of values. And that feels counter to the project that I have claimed for myself, which is to renounce an outward facing address and only face my people and only talk to my people and not talk about us to others. And so I don't need to, if I'm talking to another Sudanese person who is in deep pain and deep grief, I don't need to tell that reader what it's like. You know what I mean? And so what is the function of the simile in this context, other than to be decorative, other than to show that I can? And I find that gradually becoming less and less interesting and less practical to me. I think I'm in a moment where I have very practical needs of my practice. And which is, you know, I'm not being like abolish the metaphor, abolish the simile. You know, hopefully in gentler times, I will find my way back, but I don't feel I have the luxury in this moment of trying to think about what it's like, because there is such a dearth of language about what it is, and my responsibility is to the language of what it is right now. And then maybe there will be time for adornment and beauty and connective tissue later on, but right now, I don't know, we're in triage. So no similes right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very much so reminds me of Kaminsky's The Body of a Boy Lays on the Pavement Like the Body of a Boy. Yeah, and also some talk around audience in there too. So thank you, Safia.
So I write in two languages, my native tongue, the Arabic language, and also the English language. I don't remember myself writing a single poem in the Arabic language since October 7th. And I feel like so in the Arabic language, I'm mostly addressing myself as a human being who is part of this big world that is about 14 billion years old. Whereas in the English language, I'm talking to the other who does not live with us. I mean, Gaza has been under siege since 2007, has been under occupation since 1948, just as other Palestinian cities. But the other who has never been to Gaza, unless they are journalists who had the permit to enter Gaza, who had never, I mean, if it's different in the West Bank. I mean, you can find many activists, many journalists, many people visiting in the West Bank. But in the Gaza Strip, I've never seen a journalist, sorry, a foreigner, someone from the outside world coming just to visit Gaza, to meet friends, let's say, to meet, to visit relatives, etc. So I feel like since October 7th and even a little bit before, I've been talking to someone outside of Gaza. I'm not even talking to my friends. I mean, in terms of writing poems, you know, about us, about our dreams, about our human dreams, but not about, of course, political dreams, about the destruction of the war. So this genocide has affected the language that I'm using to express my feelings and my experiences. So this is one thing. The other thing is that this genocide has added, I mean, the amount of destruction that I witnessed, the danger I was in when I was in Gaza during the first 2 months of the genocide. These experiences and these emotions have given me new images. They have given me new similes. You know, for example, in one picture I saw, because there are not enough ambulances, there are not enough paramedics, there are not enough fire trucks. There is not enough fuel even for these vehicles if they were there. So and there are not enough medical equipment. There is not enough medical equipment or even stretchers. So in one picture, in one video, I saw a group of people carrying the body of an injured person on a door instead of on a stretcher. So that image itself gave me the idea that these people are a wall carrying the door with them. So it was kind of a moving wall. So that, I mean, it's really a very cruel image to see that the door to a room is being carried by a wall of people. What's happening here is that in my poems, in my articles, I have similar components, but with more and more in quantity. So if in the past I had 1 ton of shrapnel, 1 ton of, 100 liters of blood, in these poems, there are more pieces of shrapnel, there are more corpses, there are more, there is more rubble in the poems. So I don't feel any big difference between this genocide and the previous ones. The difference is that the amount here of silence is deafening. The amount of rubble is bigger because now 70% of the houses in the Gaza Strip are either destroyed or damaged by airstrikes. If in the past a house could not recognize the street where it was, nowadays neither the house nor the street recognize each other because everything is wiped out. You can't recognize whether this was a kindergarten, a school. So even in the poem, sometimes this confusion is there. And I'm noticing that in some of my new poems, I focus on repetition because everything is being repeated. In many of my poems in the first collection, I have a poem about a family that was wiped out. It's called Shrapnel Looking for Laughter. So this poem, I think I can write it and even make it longer because there are more families and bigger families who have been wiped out because of the genocide. So it keeps happening and happening. And this repetition is reflected in my writing of poems.
Thank you for that. Jake or Jose?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that I think about craft and I mean, during our sort of like, so I come from the Navajo Nation, and when we were being actively settled, and the sort of like period of removal that we've had, we were placed in detention camps across New Mexico, across the American Southwest, and one of them was a fort just around the New Mexico-Texas border. And we were there, and weaving is a big part of our culture, a big part of our creation story, and it becomes a big part of our craft. I think all Diné writers, I don't want to speak for all Diné writers, but all Diné writers really has come to writing with knowledge of weaving, or weaving as a kind of craft element, I guess. And while we were displaced and removed from our traditional homelands, generally our weavers up until that point worked within colors that could be found colors that were created by dyes found by plants in the American Southwest. So generally that means black, red, and that's it, right? So that's really the only colors that could be created during that time. And through trade through South America, we're able to get things like indigo, right? So blue began sort of like showing up in our work. And then removal and displacement happened, where we were able to get these vibrant colors of artificially dyed wool, right? Because of the United States being able to sort of have these artificially created colors like pink and orange. And I feel like what the weavers did while they were displaced and sort of like detained in this detention camp, what ended up happening is an explosion of Navajo weaving using basically all the colors that were available to them. And they were able sort of to use just like things that they found on site, right? So they were given yarn, artificially dyed yarn. They were given sort of like, things that they could sort of create, like out of their blankets that they were given, right? Creating these kind of like weaves, using things around them. And so for me, I think that tradition of trying to figure out how to almost write a letter, right, towards some kind of future or past at the same time, using things around you, I feel like is the way in which I sort of think about writing right now. And for me, I think epistolary forms has been a thing that I've been sort of researching for the past year or so, of like, what does it mean to write a letter? What does it mean to write a letter to people that are no longer here, to the future who are no longer here yet, right? And I think it helps me sort of situate time and temporality a lot in my writing, because when you're writing a letter, right, you're almost writing into time. And I think that conceptual sort of rethinking and reorientation helps sort of ground me in the practice of writing a lot.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jake.
Right now I'm working on a novel, so I haven't been writing a lot of poems. What I'm trying to work on with the novel is so I come from a people that migrated to the United States because there was no more opportunity in the small rural village where they grew up in Mexico. There wasn't running water. And so because of that, they migrated to the United States only to find that what they hoped to find in the United States was not actually available to them, that if it was available, I don't know if it's available to anybody, but it certainly wasn't available to my parents and grandparents. They found, more kinds of economic instability. And what I've been sitting with is this idea that, I used to think that migration happened once, that it was, that there was a place of leaving and a place of arrival. And I think more and more I'm thinking about the fact that, my family may have to migrate again, that there may never be an end to migration, that there may never be, that there might not be an end to it. Part of it because of climate change, part of it because of ongoing wars all over the world, part of it because of economic disaster, because of food shortages and water shortages. And so in trying to write the novel, I've been trying to, I think in part, been trying to kind of reverse some of the stories that we tell, particularly in my community, in the Mexican American community, about what migration means and what does triumphant migration mean, and try and give try and poke some holes into maybe some of the comforts that those kinds of stories might give us, and try to tell a new kind of story that imagines different possibilities and tries to reimagine what community can look like in the context of not necessarily being able to rely on a place to give you stability and form, people and food and substance. So those are some of the questions that I've been sitting with.
Thank you for that. I can't wait till that novel comes out. Super exciting. And thank you all for these mini craft talks. I myself have been really working on a collection of poems that center Black folks and water. And so I think I've been really using water as kind of an informative piece of my craft moves, if you will. And specifically, I believe it's Toni Morrison who says, all water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. And so I don't know, that's kind of how I've been thinking about language, and also thinking about water as this, all the water that has ever existed on the planet is the only water that has ever existed and will exist, right? And so I've been using that rule as a rule with language as well, right? And so trying to stick to the pieces of language that are already on the page and maybe shuffle it around or move it around the same way in which water does a thing, right? So I've been toying with that, and maybe secretly is why I'm interested in y'all's own process. I want to ask maybe, I don't know if this is a lighter question or a heavier question, we'll see. But I'm curious, and maybe I'm just a messy girl, and it is what it is. But I'm curious as to y'all's unpopular opinions, either unpopular political opinions or unpopular poetic opinions. If that's something you feel comfortable sharing, maybe you're letting it dance around in your head, or maybe it's already made its way through the group chat of sorts. But does anybody want to start unpopular political or poetic opinions? I know, right? You have to think before you speak on this one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't think if this political opinion would be popular or unpopular, but I think that it doesn't apply to specific people, but this is a general saying that I say, which is by the time you start, by the time you massacre other people, by the time you victimize other people, you are no longer a victim. So even if you are a victim, if you start to victimize other people, no matter what the reason was, you are no longer a victim. And this applies, you know, to any place, to any conflict, to any kind of people. So you can't continue to say that I'm the victim for 100 years, and you, you know, and during this time you continue to victimize other people, to occupy other people, to kill other people, and to steal other people. You can't continue to claim that you are a victim. By the time you make other people's victim, then you are no longer a victim. So that's it could be popular, it could be unpopular, regardless. But I wanted to just comment on the Toni Morrison's quote, because, you know, she said that every drop of water has a memory. And I think this also applies to the rubble, to stones. And in this context, I'm thinking about the stones that constitute the rubble of houses that were bombed, whether in Gaza, whether in Yemen, in Sudan, in here, when maybe the houses of the natives were blown up by the colonizers, or in World War I, World War II, etc. So I think even stones have memories. These stones one time belonged, you know, to a living room, to a kitchen, to a ceiling, you know, behind, maybe this stone was lying behind a picture frame on a wall, you know, maybe it had some paint on it. So even stones have really memory, just like water does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I believe the same is true for the land, that it knows everything. But other folks on popular opinions?
Okay, I have a poetry hot take. I hope this is a safe space, but I think that being able to write a poem in inherited form, so like a sonnet, a sestina, whatever, is not a flex. It is a tool. Those forms are a tool, and as such, it makes me a little itchy whenever I see the form named in the title. So if the title of the poem is like sestina, in which I'm like, I don't, just start your poem, you know? If I can see that it's a sestina, cool. And also the poem should work even without me being able to recognize that it's a sestina. Or, you know, like double sonnet, in which you know what I mean? Like that's not a flex to me, to be honest.
I love it. I'm guilty and I love it.
I too am guilty. You hate in others that which you fear in yourself.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm also guilty. I have to change all my titles now. My popular opinion, the thing that I've been thinking about, in part because I just taught this essay by Namwali Serpell called The Banality of Empathy. And this is something that we've touched on already in the conversation, but my unpopular opinion is that reading for empathy is bullshit and self-serving more than anything. Namwali in that essay gives this great example where she says, you know, if you see someone drowning in a lake, you don't need to empathize with them in order to understand that they need help and in order to act, right? And so the idea that in times of crisis, the first thing some people think about is, let me read so I can empathize about what's going on, as opposed to finding ways to act however they can, feels disingenuous to me.
Thank you for this.
I was sort of running through my head about my sort of like the tweets that got like a lot of comments from just random people on the internet, and I tend to delete my tweets. So if you look at my Twitter, it's like only a select few. But the ones that, you know, got a lot of attention, I feel like were two. So the first one was about, and this could be tied to a little bit what we're talking about, is that studying poetry, right, or studying just creative writing, studying writing in general, should be divorced from the English departments, right? I don't think that students need to sort of study literature in order to understand creative writing or understand poetry, right? And I feel like if we want to develop truly sovereign, right, modes of thinking and writing, we need to divorce ourselves from the history of the English department, the history of the university in and of itself, right? To sort of create these kind of new ways that we want to think about how we teach writing toward a kind of liberatory kind of, movement in some way. And that got a lot of responses from random people. The second one was probably the most controversial, where I sort of talked about, and I think it was like around Indigenous Peoples Day, right, in October, when people were like, celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, and I posted something like, if you really want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, you should first give up your land, right? If you own a home or your own land, you should immediately return that to the nearest native nation. And two, you should wipe out your savings account, because hoarding wealth, right, is very much is not sort of looking toward liberation. It's acting into capitalism, which in and of itself is the driving force of settler colonialism, and that got a lot of backlash. So I think those are my two sort of unpopular kind of takes that I've had.
Yeah, those are radical, Jake. But I like it. I mess with them heavy. I haven't decided exactly what mine is, but I will say I've seen one too many TikToks about Kamala Harris. I'm very excited and I'm also terrified. But I think that is probably the duality of living in this country, unfortunately. Just always a little skeptical. And I know we are coming upon time. I still have one too many questions. I will say you all are very interesting. I really appreciate all of this, all of these responses. I feel like I definitely feel better after listening to y'all than when I first came in. So thank you for making the world, or at least my world, a better place. But I want to end on this last question, which is about joy, or self-care, or strength. And I'm just curious as to what's giving you strength in this time, what's bringing you joy, or how do you exercise joy? Are you exercising joy? Are you taking care of yourself, and how are you doing that? If you don't mind sharing.
I can go first. I joined a basketball league here in Jersey City. And I'm very bad at basketball, but it's been fun to run around with real people. And so that's been bringing me a lot of joy.
Okay, I can. Okay, Safia, sorry. Just
No,
very.
I feel like my answer is gonna be unsatisfying, because I don't know that I have been reaching for joy in any kind of noticeable ways for the past little while. But the thing that, I don't know, that gives me strength, I guess, or in that like gives me energy, the thing that is my engine, is I'm so pissed off. I'm so angry. And that for now works, I like sometimes get done the things I need to get done, like out of spite almost. And I know that is not a sustainable engine necessarily, but for right now, this is what I've got and it's still working. But I don't know about like the kind of the best feeling I can achieve. The best feeling I can achieve these days is like, I feel neutral about some things, and that's like really comforting to be like so on 10 about everything, and then like watch a nothing movie and be like, cool, I feel truly neutral about what I just consumed, and what a relief. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for being honest and not, I like sometimes hate forced joy. So thank you for being honest. And for just for the record, Jose did say I go to the gym out of spite. And I agree with that. It's like, you know what? I'm gonna keep on living. I'm gonna take care of myself. See? Mosab, I know you're about to say something.
Thank you. I'm not really finding any joy because I'm in search for hope in these difficult times. But I think I see a lot of rays of hope in this world when I see the young generation taking to the street and shouting and posting about the injustices, not only in Palestine, but everywhere in the world. I think this generation will be leading any change in the coming few years. And I think they need our support. They need, I think they need our poetry because they, you know, in some demonstrations, I saw people, you know, carrying posters that have Refaat Alareer's poem, If I Must Die. They were flying kites. And I think the more kites they are flying in the sky, whether in Europe or in America or, you know, in Africa or Asia or even in the oceans, I think the more kites they are flying, the less destruction will be falling from the sky by way of human beings, soldiers, and so I think I'm seeing a lot of hope. I can't find any joy these days, but I'm looking for hope, and this hope is on the horizon. It's everywhere, but it needs, you know, to gather and be put in a place to become even more and more solid.
Thank you for the honesty. I think hope is extremely brave.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think joy as desire, right, is almost reading like Manifest Destiny. Right? So it's like this kind of like settler construction of what we're supposed to attain, right? That if we work really hard, right, and participate in society, we will reach this utopic joy, right? So I think joy as a settler construction is could be very harmful, right? Because then we're sort of like seeing the ways in which we're not seeing or reaching joy, right? When all we are exposed to pretty much on a daily basis is a violence or kind of violences, right? And so I think, yeah, I mean, day to day, we find happiness, right? We find things that make us laugh or things that could bring a kind of hope, right? But for looking into my own sort of where I come from, and I'm thinking through like the kind of like attainment that we sort of like strive for, joy or happiness is not one of those things, right? Instead, it's what we call sort of like a balance, right? So in Diné, we would call it raison, which kind of means like balance, that you're looking for an orientation toward beauty, an orientation toward hope, but acknowledging that the world around you is a violent place, that it's a dark place, that people can be very harmful to you, that at every single waking moment you're not going to be enjoying life, but you're going to be surviving, and you're going to be working toward the next morning and the next morning and the next morning, right? And if all you ever do is try to reach that next morning, then you're living a fruitful life, right? Yeah. And I feel like that for me is much more interesting than joy, right? Because I took up the role of an artist and as a poet, which means joy is going to be a hard thing to come by, because I'm always in conversation with violence, always in conversation with death and people who are no longer with us, right? And when you make friends of those things, right, or be in company with them, it's hard to feel joy. And I feel like rage is almost kind of like the answer to that and the response to that, and it's one that's valid, right? And we sort of like work through these emotions to get to, again, the next morning and the next morning and the morning after.
Thank you all so much. I feel like, I hate to say that's a perfect note to end on, but I feel like, you said everything. Yeah, so thank y'all for engaging this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Really appreciative. Again, it's been an honor, privilege to be here and just listen to y'all. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Sherelle, and if there's anything else we should do or need to do.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This has been just a really beautiful conversation. If y'all don't mind, I have just one more question I wanted to ask. I don't know if y'all have time for like 5 or 10 more minutes. I just had like quick final question. But yeah, I was just curious because this is the culture issue that we're working on. And just thinking about, folks keep talking about Toni Morrison, who is often banned heavily in prisons and schools throughout the US, and just thinking about how Georgia just banned the AP African American Studies I think yesterday. And so I'm thinking about this idea of American culture, American way of life, and like who gets to participate in that literary canon, and what books aren't allowed to participate, what voices or narratives aren't. So I just want to hear your all's thoughts on like this current idea of like a culture war or like culture in crisis, or just regarding like, yeah, who gets to participate in poetry and share their words.
I don't know that I believe there's such thing as American culture. I think there, like, it's too big, it's too many people here for there to be like a single unifying American culture. And so when I do hear language around like culture wars or the canon or all that, like whose culture, whose canon? Because like my canon is doing fine. You know what I mean? So I think there is this like, I don't know, there's supposed to be this kind of ambition to cross over into mainstream American culture, and that is where like true, whatever, the true platform exists. And that just is a project that is fundamentally uninteresting to me. I don't want a megaphone, you know what I mean? I want to be in constant, intimate, closely proximal conversation with the people that I'm actually talking to. And if like anyone else wants to eavesdrop on this conversation, by all means, but I don't know that. I think we also, are increasingly living in a moment where there's so many different ways to access literature and culture and language and everything that, while it is deeply infuriating that all these like restrictions are being put into place in the classroom setting in the schools, my hope, since we've introduced that word to the conversation, is that it will drive like the curious mind outside of the classroom in search of information, and then there's a whole world out there. And I think that actually is like a canonical coming of age journey anyway, to be like dissatisfied with the kinds of information and the kinds of telling that are available in institutions, and using that as the engine to go seek knowledge elsewhere. I think that actually is like a long and healthy and robust like kind of educational journey. And I think as the restrictions continue to grow and the like institutional classroom becomes a like decreasingly viable space for learning and for information, I hope that the like alternative learning spaces that we have all spent time with in like throughout our youths and coming of age will be reinforced by the continued need for them, and will be available when people come looking for them.
So for me, I think that it depends. I mean, there shouldn't be anything that's called a cultural canon or even literary canon. It depends on us, what we want to be learning and what we want to be teaching to the young generation. Because there are, just as Safia said, there are many learning spaces where people can educate themselves and they can create their own canon. And for me, anything that has to do with humanity, with our shared human rights, should be the criterion for this, whatever canon it is, whether it's American literature, American culture, Palestinian culture, Arab culture, etc. So anything that does not go in the same lines as our shared human rights, as our shared human feelings, our shared human experiences, should not be part of any canon. And again, we should be the people of the world with a capital P. We are the one who decide what to be in our canon. There shouldn't be any American, Arab, British canon. It should be a human or people's canon. We decide what it is, what should be part of it, how we understand it. You know, it's not really controlled, but I think we should be deciding what we should be learning, what we should be teaching our children. Because in these times, we don't have, you know, a specific source of education or a specific way of learning, because it's all there. It's on Instagram, people talking and posting and, you know, addressing everyone. There is nothing that's called canon, I think, in this age.
No, I agree. I think if there is an American culture, it's definitely a settler one, and it's imperial one, right? I mean, I think what that culture does and calls for is co-option, right? And theft, right? Outright. And I think one of the things that it does quite well is sort of like co-opt movements for liberation, right? So I think this whole notion of book banning, right, while, you know, genuine in its start, right, and we want to ensure kids have access to books, right, I think what happens is it becomes then kind of like a scapegoat, right, or a way to sort of like to be like, oh, I'm doing the change of, you know, trying to fight book banning. So for example, with PEN America, right, the whole reason why they were like, we can't talk about Gaza, we can't talk about what's happening there, is because, oh, we're focused on book banning here in the United States. But, you know, I feel like it becomes just that. And for me, I feel like as I was sort of hearing that argument, I was thinking to myself, but the classroom and education of itself, K through 12 and university, all of those are tools of empire and settler culture, right? And I feel like what if they decide to ban our books, then we have to figure out how to create community and create and get access to those kids on our own, right? Through ourselves. How do we get books for free to kids who don't have access to them in the classroom? We can't rely on a classroom because in and of itself, the classroom has always been a mechanism for removal, has always been a mechanism for assimilation, right? And we can look to indigenous communities across the world and look at residential schools and boarding schools to sort of see the ways in which education of itself, the classroom, has been used as a kind of violence. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think that that the canon itself is something that we should even aspire toward. It's kind of, again, sort of a constructed thing. It should be something that's ever evolving, always moving, and in constant flux.
Jose, would you like to add, or you feel good?
Yeah, I don't know. What I'm thinking about is, yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to add anything. I feel like y'all have pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily have anything to add other than the fact that, I don't know, when people ban books, I'm like, you're banning ideas, and the ideas from people you would like to actually ban the people themselves is what I think. And I can't remember who said it, but I become even more interested in making sure folks are reading the banned books, right? That secretly becomes a part of my mission. I'm like starting a bookstore in about a month or so, but our bathroom is a banned book bathroom, right? But just like literally putting on the text on the walls in which, you know, folks said this shouldn't be read or this idea shouldn't be spread. So I just agree with everybody's sentiments, and thank you for, you know, giving us that context of a question.
Thank you all so much. I don't know if you had something else to add, so you went off mute, but yeah, does anyone have anything else to add? Anything else before we end the recording?
I have nothing but to say thank you for gathering us here, people who represent different cultures. I mean, it's one culture, okay? But I mean, different background, different struggles, although it's one struggle. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation, and I hope one day in the future we will have something in on a real stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.